The SNP is crumbling. The SNP is not doing particularly well right now, and Scotland in general is not doing great.
Yes.
But the SNP in particular are having a pretty harsh time of it. And I can only really say that it's their own fault when you start to look into some of the details of what's going on.
For anyone who doesn't know who the SNP are, it's the Scottish National Party, quote unquote.
I think they're looking to change it to the Scottish Independence Party now because they're
Are they?
I've heard that. I don't know entirely how
right.
true that is, but I wouldn't be surprised because I have seen a few people complaining a Scottish Nationalist Party. Oh, that sounds a bit mid-century German, doesn't it?
Well, I saw Nicola Sturgeon doing an interview a few years ago where she's like, well, I wouldn't have called it the Nationalist Party because obviously
I don't actually care about Scottish people.
Well, she's an internationalist. She's a communist.
Yeah, of course.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like it's wearing the nationalist skin suit, but it's full on revolutionary communism underneath it. So it's like, okay, great. I'm glad they're losing.
Oh, trust me, we'll get to the communism because they are just going all in with the communism by the end of this segment. But first, we've got some more new content on the website. Connor did an interview with Mary Harrington, who describes herself as a reactionary feminist off the back of her book. What was it? Feminism Against Progress or something like that?
Yeah, I haven't watched the interview yet, right? But Connor has been like telling me basically everything I say, she's coming out with as well. But she's arrived at this position from the feminist position. So like the traditional position and the feminist position are harmonizing.
It's very interesting how this has happened. But yeah, if you're interested in checking that out, you can find it on the website. Memberships start as low as £5 per month. And with that, you'll be able to access all of the other excellent work that we do. So please consider giving us a subscription. Anyway, moving on. So Colin Beattie is yes, still currently is the treasurer of the SNP. Right. And he has been arrested.
Really?
Yes, he has been arrested due to an investigation by the police into the party's finances, which has been going on since 2021.
Right.
And there's been quite a lot of information coming out about this recently.
Wasn't this why Nicola Sturgeon was arrested as well?
I believe it was her husband.
Sorry, her husband.
It was her husband that was arrested, but she did apparently one day just get home to find some police officers rooting through her knicker drawer just in case that she'd left some suspicious documents in there.
600K or something they were looking for.
Yeah, it's 600K or thereabouts seems to be the figure that a lot of people are concerned about. So this article from the BBC is talking about it. So the arrest was made in connection with the investigation into funding and finances from the SNP. SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell, who is the husband of Nicola Sturgeon, was also arrested recently after officers spent 2 days searching through their Glaswegian home and the party's headquarters in Edinburgh. A luxury motorhome had been seized by officers from outside of a property in Dunfermline. Scottish names always trip me up a little bit. Yeah. And the vehicle had been parked outside of the home of Mr. Murrell's 92-year-old mother since January 2021. Right. Interesting why a 90-year-old would have to have a luxury motorhome. They're not particularly mobile people, as far as I'm aware, but I'm sure it was all legally signed out in her name, so I'm sure that's all fine. They did also start digging in the garden. For some reason, I don't know what they found.
Literally a buried chest of loot.
Yes, perhaps they were looking
Scottish
for a swag bag. Just a nice round sack with a $$ sign on it.
The SNP is actually the pirate party now.
Don't make me like them. Mr. Murrell was later released without charge, but he is pending further investigation. And this is all just part of this. They're presumably taking all of these people in and questioning them. And Mr. Beattie might not be having a great time of it. And we can know he's a very trustworthy, very honest individual because he is a former international banker. The sorts of people that I would want to trust my finances with. Yeah. The Sunday Times had reported that he had...
Well, they always seem to have loads of money. I mean...
Yeah, that's true. Where it came from, who knows? But he had told the party's ruling National Executive Committee that the SNP was struggling to balance its books due to a drop in membership and membership numbers and donors. The formal investigation began in July 2021 after receiving complaints about how donations were used. And this is where that 600,000 figure is coming into it. So the SNP raised a total of 666,000, kind of satanic number, kind of sus straight away, £953, through a referendum-based related appeals between 2017 and 2020. The party had pledged to spend these funds on the independence campaign, but...
That's not that much, actually.
Yeah, I was surprised as well. I was expecting a party like the SNP, given that they are the national party of Scotland, which has...
And they're also the largest party.
Yeah, pretty much all of the seats. Yeah. I would expect them to have more than that from their donors as well. You would expect there to be some high-profile Scottish donors going, we want the independence, here's £1 million. But no, that's apparently the money that they had.
Right, okay.
But they started to ask questions when accounts showed that it had just under £97,000 in the bank at the end of 2019 and total net assets of about £272,000. So there seems to be a big discrepancy of, say, around £300,000 of where money could have gone. They have been saying since then, we just spent it all. We just spent it all on party funding and advertising and campaign slogans and such like that. But people were going, well, that's a lot of money that seems to have vanished.
Where are the receipts then?
Yes. And then on this Sunday just past, something very damning came out, which was Nicola Sturgeon in a leaked video for a meeting of the ruling body in 2021 over video call, where she was playing down fears about the party finances. She was saying, we've never been stronger financially. We've got all of this money. We're looking great. Please stop asking questions. That was the main thrust of the video, was please stop asking questions. If you start asking questions, this will cause us some big trouble. So shut up and keep your mouth shut. And then also the party's...
Very transparent and democratic.
Very much so.
Yeah.
The party's auditors, Johnson Carmichael, also quit in September. And Mr. Humza Yousaf, the new First Minister of Scotland and leader of the SNP, said that he only found out about it after he won the leadership contest 6 months later. You'd think that would be big news that our party doesn't have an auditor anymore, but managed to evade him for 6 months.
Yep.
And the SNP has failed to find another auditor, is facing a race against time to file its accounts by the Electoral Commission deadline in July. And this all came out. Colin Beattie was arrested on the same day, yesterday, that Humza Yousaf was set to come out and give his first policy speech, his first major policy speech. What instead happened, he did go out and give his speech.
First policy speech, squeeze the Scots for money. Good luck.
Yes, actually. Yes, pretty much that. They're now set that he said one of his first things that he said, he came out and he said we're going to have the most progressive tax policy in all of the UK.
Okay, good
We're
luck.
going to ramp up tax for all of the people in Scotland who are above a certain bracket. So yes,
amazing, as if they're not just going to flee to England.
Exactly. And
or Ireland.
But one of the first things that happened before he managed to make the speech was reporters came up to him and asked, are you a criminal organisation? Are you sure you're not some form of mob organisation? And he said, no.
To the best of my knowledge, we are not a criminal organisation.
As far as I can say right now, probably not. But I listened to the speech. I would have played some clips, but it was dull.
Yeah.
It was dull. It was boring. He said we need equality. It's all about building a greener, fairer future. All the talking points.
Democrat, communist talking points.
Yeah, we're going to more progressive tax. We're going to fight anti-poverty. We need net zero. They're going to introduce a new human rights bill in Scotland, which will make it a more inviting place to immigrants. And
that's not a bad idea.
Along with some of the other stuff,
I'm in favour of that. Scotland being more inviting to immigrants.
Well, that's the thing. Along with some of the other stuff that is going to be happening in Scotland in the next few years, I'm quietly hopeful. I'm quietly hopeful that this might fix some of England's problems. But I'll get further into that as we go on.
Thing is, we laugh, but we still got to bail them out when they F it up. Well, we're still going to pay for this.
Yeah, that is the problem. If I remember correctly, Callum's told me this before. Isn't Scotland a net tax drain on the English people?
Yes.
Brilliant. That's just what I want to be paying for all sorts that goes up in Scotland.
They don't pay for their healthcare stuff. When you go to a pharmacy, you have to pay for your thing. They don't.
Oh yeah, he was bragging about in the Scottish Parliament. He was bragging about how they don't have to pay prescriptions or anything like that,
and that's paid for by the English. So enjoy that.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, he was saying about
all
of these new things.
More immigrants to come in to get free prescriptions that the English can pay for. So.
That makes sense as to why he was bragging about all of this in the Scottish Parliament in that case, because I listened to a lot of it and he was just saying, we give this and we give this. We just give gibs constantly. Yeah. And I just thought to myself, how can they afford all of this stuff?
They can't.
Yes, evidently.
Which is why I vote for Scottish independence.
As do I. And interestingly, among all of this controversy, Nicola Sturgeon...
I'm pro-Scottish independence out of vindictiveness.
Nicola Sturgeon decided to gain some independence of her own and decided that this was the perfect opportunity to learn to drive.
Oh, good for her.
So instead of attending Holyrood, and instead of attending to all of the controversies around the party, she decided to skip all of that and take some driving lessons instead. Very interesting approach.
Well, I mean, she's not the party leader anymore, not her problem.
I suppose so, but some of the controversy seems to be surrounding her time as party leader, but but look at how happy she looks.
But also, you'd think, okay, my legacy here as one of the dominant figures of this party for what was she, 10 years or something party leader? She's been party leader for ages, isn't she?
Since Alexander Salmon left. So I think that was, mid-2010s? So 7 to 10 years, somewhere like that.
So she was a dominant figure in the SNP. And you would think she would be concerned about passing this along and the continuation of her legacy and the party itself. Because basically, it looks like she's ran it into the ground and then just handed it off, and now it's going to just collapse. Well,
yeah, everybody did. The whole reason that she left in the first place, she said she was the same as Jacinda Ardern and some of the others. Oh, I've just been so stressed. I need to make time for my own life. Finally, I can pass the baton over to the next line. Except what actually happened was that she wanted to push the gender reform bill that would have made it very easy for people of a stupidly young age to change their gender on all the government certificates very easily. Everyone in Scotland went, I hate that. She also was struggling very hard to find whether Isla Bryan or whatever the person's name was, the Scottish rapist,
was a male rapist who was going to be put in a women's prison, and the Conservatives had to step in and be like, you can't put a rapist man in this woman's prison.
And Nicola Sturgeon and ahed about it a little bit.
Yeah, and then she gave a speech in which she defined the 3 genders, which are male, female, and rapist. It was incredible.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was genuinely incredible. Gender ideology is just melting.
And then
politics,
she said,
wherever it goes.
I've given you all of the service I can, Scotland, goodbye. I need to take some driving lessons.
I've screwed this up, you're on your own.
Yeah, and in this article they also point out that Humza Yousaf, being a genius, thought, how am I going to fix this?
His nickname in Scotland is Humza Useless.
Well, he's got time. He's got time. He might prove himself.
I see all of the Scottish, nationalist Twitter, the pro-nationalist Twitter accounts. It's consistent, just Humza Useless under every post he makes.
He's still got time to prove himself. We don't know.
Yeah, I know.
We don't know what
great.
might happen.
Yeah.
For instance, he thought, how am I going to fix this? I know. I'll go with the most popular policy proposal that anybody has ever had constantly, which is...
more rapists in women's prisons?
More tax.
Oh, brilliant.
More tax. He unveiled plans to double council tax for second homes in Scotland in a speech to trade union leaders. This is going to be very popular.
I'm doubling council tax. Vote for me. Why would I do that?
Yep.
Honestly.
But there are other problems in Scotland as well, and that's what the second half of this segment will be focusing on, because one of the SNP things that they want to talk about is this thing called a minimum income guarantee.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as this starts to hit the headlines, I start to see BBC News articles in lockstep like this. Thousands more Scots living in very deep poverty, from their charity section, where they point out that the number of people in Scotland living in very deep poverty has gone up by about 50%. In 25 years, suggested by new research, which to me sounds like a damning indictment
of progressivism.
Progressivism, yes. Seeing as
the more progressive Scotland has become, the poorer Scottish people have become themselves.
But
amazing.
Let's carry on. So, anti-poverty charity, and this is important, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation found that 150,000 more were living at this level, but the overall number of people below the poverty line had improved. So what's happened is essentially that people who weren't too bad have got better, and those who were already bad have just got worse.
Right.
And they say, well, we need to fix this. So they say that 460,000 people in Scotland were living in very deep poverty from 2017 to 2020, up from 310,000 between 1994 and 1997. So once again, there you see the numbers there in terms of the dates. The more progressive it's got over those years, since the late 90s, when everything in England went wrong, everything in Britain went wrong, it's just got worse for those people who were even poorer. So the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, in response to this, called on the UK government, not the Scottish government.
You don't want to call on the SNP to do something.
The UK government to adopt a guarantee to ensure universal credit provides enough to cover the cost of essentials, and it also wants the Scottish government to accelerate efforts to create a minimum income guarantee. Interestingly, they point out here, Associate Director for Scotland, Chris Burt, said the story of poverty in Scotland over the past 20 years is a bleak contradiction that both the UK and Scottish governments need to wake up to. Chris Burt is important here.
Right. Is this, I haven't looked into this in any way, but is this that there are a bunch of people who've been trapped on benefits and they're getting more poor because they've been on benefits for so long?
I would imagine so. They don't go into much detail about how these people have got poorer and poorer, but I would imagine it's something like that. And if you're wondering what the minimum income guarantee is, it's UBI.
Yeah.
If you've ever heard about anything like a universal basic income scheme or guarantee, it is exactly that. If we go to the next one, it will be £25,000 a year guaranteed.
That's more than the average wage.
Yes, it is. In fact, they point out that it's more than the average wage.
What?
So it's because
A
they
bunch
want
of smack addicts in Scotland are getting 25 grand a year,
for doing nothing.
and I'm paying for it.
Yes, well, it's because you may call them smack addicts. We call them people of low dignity.
We call them Scotland.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dank.
No, no, they're people of low dignity. And what happens is the poorer you are, the less dignified you are.
Right,
and we
yeah.
need to give them £25,000 a year so
That's
we can
the
make
price
them
of
more
dignity,
dignified.
is it? Right.
Yes, it is.
25 grand.
Also a few grams on the street corner, I assume. But so they say billions of pounds will be handed to the jobless and lower earners to ensure that everyone has a dignified quality of life. Suppose that what I can imagine is after this is implemented, we'll be able to go to Glasgow and we'll see people in top hats, canes, pocket watches, monocles, wandering the streets,
Gold-trimmed kilts.
Yes, exactly that. Discussing the latest play they saw at the theatre that night.
Yeah.
That's only the only thing that I can imagine.
I mean, that is their
happening from
dream as well. That's literally the dream in their head, that they will have these posh Scots wandering around all of a sudden, but it won't be. It'll just be the heroin market will skyrocket.
Absolutely, it will. So supporters of the proposal, dubbed Communism Light,
It is.
and it's not light. When we get into the actual documents that they've written about it, it's basically Communism Max.
Really?
They've maxed the communism. They say it would help fight poverty and tackle health inequalities. And they
doubt it.
Yep, and they are clear that it should be funded by massively raising taxes on medium and high earners, because that's never scared anyone off.
They don't understand anything, do they?
Well, the funny thing is, one of the Scottish Conservatives brought this up in Humza Yousaf's first speech, and he just turned around and went, yeah, well, Liz Truss mini budget, I win. That was his argument.
Liz Truss says, I'd like to cut tax mini budget.
Yes.
And so Humza Yousaf's like,
he said that collapsed markets. Ignore the fact that the markets are controlled by people who don't want taxes cut.
And so Humza Yousaf's like, right, so if I do the opposite of that, which is massively raise taxes on medium and high earners, then everyone's a winner?
More taxes equals more GDP. This is this is the obvious solution. Carl, what don't you understand about economics?
Yeah, a lot, apparently.
You've been listening to Dan, haven't you?
I have, actually, yeah.
And
but
you
I
should
don't
listen to
understand
Dan
economics
as well.
at all. Yeah, you should, actually.
Economics very good.
I hate this. It's just like, look, so you're not a complete jobless bum and smack addict, lounging around on the streets of Glasgow and Edinburgh. Well, then that means I need to tax you because you worked hard, you earned something, and you don't deserve that. That smack addict deserves that. I hate it.
And don't you agree?
No.
Does the smack addict not deserve an equal dignity of life? No, they don't, of course.
Get a job!
Yeah, critics have pointed out the obvious, that this would completely remove the incentive to work and plunge Scotland's economy into stagnation. Because once again, if you can just sit around and say, I've got some kind of disability, and given the fact that they're trying to make it more equitable, more equal, all this nonsense, you probably won't even have to prove it.
I'm against equity. I'm for people who work hard at keeping what they get and people who don't work getting nothing.
I'm for equality among equals. And equals are something hard to come by. But yeah,
I actually quite like that framing, equality among equals.
Well, I've been reading Aristotle, and that's basically his point there.
Yeah, that is good,
But what's the incentive to work? Why would you have to do anything if I can just sit around?
What's the incentive to live in Scotland?
Well, you get 25 grand for free.
Yeah, but if you're a medium or high earner, if you've got a job, you may as well leave.
Exactly. And the experts and academics and politicians on the panel, because they've got a steering group with a panel, suggest the minimum income guarantee should be set between the relative poverty line of about $18,700 a year and the minimum income standard set at $25,500 per year by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And once again, I pointed out that these guys are important. Would you like to know who's on the expert board of this steering group?
It's that guy you just mentioned.
It's Chris Burt, yes. Yeah. One of the people who's in charge of setting all of the figures and doing all of the research is also on the government panel for deciding whether they implement this or not and how they'll implement it. Interesting how this works. This is just democracy in action, folks. For example, someone who earns £20,000 could receive up to £5,500 extra in minimum income guarantee top-up payments to reach the threshold. So if you're already working, what would be the benefit of doing anything to improve yourself by your own efforts if the government's just going to top up your income anyway?
Yeah, why would I work for 20 grand a year when I could just not work and get 25 grand a year?
Because you're bored, maybe?
I
I feel like working this weekend. I'll put a few hours in, and the government will top me up.
I'll stave off the boredom with drugs.
Yes. And there you go. Those who do not work will also be entitled to full amount in benefits. A final report will be produced.
Honestly, can't take it.
I know, by the steering group in 2024. In 2018, the Institute for Public Policy Research claimed that the state-funded citizens' income in Scotland would cost £20 billion a year. The Fraser of Allender Institute estimates the proposal would need an extra £38 billion in additional funding from
the
our
entire
pockets.
Scottish economy is worth £38 billion.
Probably isn't. And then I decided to take a look further into this and actually look at the proposals that have been put forward on the Scottish Government's website. And this is the interim report. And honestly, for one, all interim reports, all government reports are all padded with the same repeated few paragraphs over and over again, put as boring as possible so that it disincentivizes you from actually reading it because they don't want you to see what's in there. But there is some interesting things in here. For instance, in the introduction, the person writing this just states outright, for me, throughout the first year, one of the key questions that's come up time and time again has not been about the technical aspects of how a minimum income guarantee could look, i.e. how it would work. Instead, whether explicitly or in the background, the same question has been ever present. How can we move to deliver more quickly big positive change in Scotland? Which just says to me, it's not how will it work, it's this is a really nice sounding idea, isn't it?
I'm totally in favour of Scottish independence at this point. I don't want to fund this.
I don't want them near me. I don't want the Scottish government near me. The Scottish people are lovely that I've met.
Yeah, but I don't want to fund this.
Me neither. They say, our task is to move a minimum income guarantee from an idea to a reality. To do that, an increasing number of us must believe that change is possible. And those of us that want to see change happen,
logic.
Yep, must work hard to make it a reality. Optimism is necessary, even if it is not sufficient for making progress. So if I just believe hard enough...
This is mad Soviet Union nonsense.
It really is. If the Scottish Parliament all sit around and just believe hard enough, money will magically appear in their pockets.
From the English taxpayer.
Well, yeah. So it's openly utopian. And then in the next one, I found this. So you go, okay, how's it going to work? What will this look like? Is there any practical consideration in this document explaining it? And this is the closest I could find, which was the minimum income guarantee level will be achieved through paid work for most households, but this will not be the case for everyone. And for some groups, this will be more challenging due to structural inequalities in participation and barriers within the labour market. To realise a minimum income guarantee, reform to the world of work is required to increase minimum levels of pay and achieve equal pay for women and marginalised groups, address the undervaluation of low and unpaid care work, reduce barriers and participation gaps, broaden pay rates, guaranteed hours, worked and career progression, and to ensure work is equitable, flexible, and accessible to all. This will mean greater numbers of people reach a minimum income guarantee level without the need for blah, blah, blah. So communism. Yeah. There's literally what they've just laid out for me there is complete and total top-down domination of the economy. It's a
command economy.
Yeah,
that's what they want.
We need to reform the world of work. Okay, so just complete state-controlled economy then.
Yeah.
All right. Fair play. Thank you for the admission. And furthermore, later on in the document, they go through all of the religious rituals and incitements where they just say the minimum income guarantee must recognise systematic racism and be designed to be anti-racist, engage with black and communities of colour and organisations advocating for blah, blah, blah.
Colour in Scotland?
Hamza Yusuf's extended family, perhaps.
Literally the entirety of the Pakistani community in Scotland is Hamza Yusuf.
Perhaps Hamza Yusuf's grandmother needs a luxury motorhome stationed outside of her house.
It's actually amazing to see people who are so captured by ideology in charge.
It really is. These people are incredibly incompetent. But
it's not just that. It's like, look, it's so inevitable that, okay, if you can get 25 grand a year for not working, you're getting over 2 grand a month to do nothing, then that incentivizes a massive number of people to do nothing. But also it's going to incentivize people to move to Scotland and become a burden on this system. But it's also going to incentivize the people who would be earning more than that to just leave.
And this is where...
This is going to leave you with an ever-growing debt as you try and pay for this until eventually people are like, we're not going to lend you any money, and this whole thing collapses. But then you're left with a bunch of people who are innovated in themselves. They haven't been getting any work skills. They haven't been getting life skills. They've been drinking, smoking, taking drugs. They've been sitting around not exercising, eating Fray Bentos pies, or Fray Bentos haggis, whatever it is.
Let's not get the Fray Bentos question back
up. And who
are
personally really unhealthy, really unfit to do anything. And so they're in a hole they can't get out of, and it's going to be absolute anarchy when that finally happens. And that's the inevitable conclusion of what they're doing here. And for some reason, the Scottish people have voted for these to be in charge.
Yes, and this is where I like to look at the positive side. Okay, there is a silver lining to this, and it could in fact be
the total collapse of Scotland.
Perhaps it could be the saving grace for England.
Longshanks wins in the long game.
Right, I am a complete supporter of Scottish independence on this basis alone. Right, they're going to include a new human rights bill that will make it easier for immigrants to move there. They're going to be more and more progressive and fair and equity-minded towards immigrants and black and communities of colours, etc., etc. You are going to be implementing a system next year, possibly a few years after, that will mean that you don't even have to work to get an immediate £25,500. Yep.
I'll take the 25 grand.
So they're going to be giving out gibs like there's no tomorrow, right? This, to me, is a complete win. Scotland goes independent, implements all of this. Every migrant living in the UK moves north to Scotland. And I am more than happy to volunteer to be the first person to lay down the bricks for the new Hadrian Wall so you can keep all of us evil English out.
I mean, think of the house prices in England. It's going to shrink.
Exactly. So what do you say,
Young people
Scotland?
will be able to afford houses again.
Scotland, Humphrey gets to be with his home people. He gets to create new Pakistan in the north of Britain. We get to have
Pakistan
England
isn't
back.
run like this.
Well, exactly. They're not run anywhere near as efficiently as this.
No, they're, like Pakistan is not nearly this insane. Sorry, Pakistan's got lots of problems, but this is not one of them.
That's all true, but let's not shout them down, Carl. Let's let them do it, and we can have England back. Okay, so
I suppose.
Scottish independence,
Scotland is a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
100% in support of. Dank, if you do want to move down, we'll accept you if you ask really
Keep
nicely.
saying, man, just start the Braveheart Party. That's all you need to do. Start the Braveheart Party. Be intrinsically libertarian. And the Scots would definitely vote for it because of the name Braveheart.
Thanks for watching that segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to find more of what we do and fancy exploring a bit, you can go to our website lotuseaters.com and subscribe to become a premium member for as little as £5 per month, which will give you access to all of the excellent work that we do. For instance, a recent hangout where Carl and Callum spoke about grooming gangs. We do live hangouts pretty regularly on the website, and they just go through the timeline of these grooming gangs. If you'd like to find more of what Carl does on a general day-to-day basis, you can follow him on Getter at Carl Benjamin. Thank you and take care.